Revenge Office Stories. The first thing she did as the new CEO was walk into my office and tell me, "You're fired. We're moving in a new direction." Her tone wasn't apologetic. It was triumphant, like she'd just conquered a foreign land. She stood there in a crisp, mercilessly tailored blazer, her smile thin and sharp. Her second act, performed just hours later without her even knowing, was to approve a wire transfer to my bank account for the entire, unadulterated sum of my yearly salary. She tried to erase me, to make an example out of me, to sweep away the old guard in one brutal display of power. But in her rush to grab the throne, she overlooked a single, critical detail in my employment contract, a detail her father, the man who built the company from nothing, had insisted on years ago. That one mistake didn't just cost her a fortune. It set off a chain reaction that would unravel her carefully built empire and force her to confront the very person she'd so arrogantly dismissed. She thought she was closing a chapter, but what she really did was arm me for the war she had just declared. To get the beautiful irony of that day, you have to understand my history with Innovatech Solutions. It wasn't just a job to me. I started there at 24, fresh out of college with a degree that felt more theoretical than useful. Back then, the company was a chaotic, brilliant whirlwind of about 20 people crammed into a space that always smelled like burnt coffee and overworked servers. At the helm was Arthur Harrison, a man whose genius was matched only by his kindness. He wasn't just a boss, he was a mentor, a visionary who saw potential in people they couldn't see in themselves. He saw it in me. I wasn't hired for a specific role. My title was something vague like Junior Operations Coordinator, but I really did everything. I organized client files, learned to troubleshoot the network, wrote copy for our first website, and sat in on late-night meetings, just soaking it all in. Arthur didn't believe in rigid hierarchies. He believed in talent and tenacity. "Good ideas don't care about job titles, Alex," he used to say, and he meant it. He built a culture of loyalty, not with pizza parties or empty slogans, but with genuine respect. He remembered our spouses' names, asked about our kids, and when we succeeded, the credit was always ours. When we failed, the responsibility was always his. Over the next 12 years, I didn't just climb a corporate ladder, I helped build it. As Innovatech grew from a scrappy startup into a multi-million-dollar tech firm, my role grew with it. I became his head of special projects, which was Arthur's code for his right-hand person. I was the company's institutional memory. I managed our most difficult, most valuable clients, the ones who'd been with us from the start, whose loyalty was to Arthur and the culture I helped maintain. I was the one who could untangle the complex web of old systems and new platforms, the one who knew not just what we did, but why we did it. And through it all, there was Isabella. Isabella Harrison was a ghost who haunted the office a few times a year. She'd sweep in during college breaks, trailing expensive perfume and entitlement. While we were pulling all-nighters to meet a deadline, she'd be there for a 2-hour internship, which was mostly just her scrolling through her phone in a conference room, sighing with the kind of profound boredom only someone who's never really worked can muster. She saw us, the long-term employees, as fixtures, like the old printers or the scuffed furniture. We were part of her father's quaint little origin story, but we had no place in the sleek corporation she had in mind. Her comments were never openly hostile, just dripping with condescension. She'd glance at my reports and say things like, "It's so interesting how you all used to do things." She called our most stable, foundational clients legacy baggage. She talked about disruption and agile frameworks with the passion of someone who'd only read about them in a textbook. She had an MBA from a school that cost more than my first house, but she lacked the one thing her father had in spades: wisdom. She saw experience not as an asset, but as a liability. To her, we weren't pioneers. We were dinosaurs waiting for a meteor. When Arthur announced his retirement, a heavy silence fell over the senior staff. We all knew what was coming. He presented it as a wonderful new chapter, a chance for fresh leadership. He stood on a small podium in the main hall, his arm around Isabella, beaming with a father's blind pride. Isabella will take Innovatech to heights I could only dream of, he said. I looked around at the faces I'd worked with for over a decade and saw the same forced smiles, the same flicker of fear in their eyes. We weren't just losing a boss, we were losing our anchor. I really did try to be optimistic. I believed in Arthur's legacy, and I thought, just maybe, some of his character had rubbed off on her. On her first official day, I sent her a welcoming email, reaffirming my commitment and offering my full support. I detailed my current projects, highlighted the critical client relationships I was managing, and suggested we meet so I could brief her properly. I never got a reply. 3 days later it happened. It was a Tuesday morning. I was on a conference call with our biggest client, a firm that had been with us for 15 years, personally managed by me for the last 8. We were finalizing a multi-year, 8-figure contract renewal and sharing a laugh about some old technical glitch when a sharp rap on my office door made me turn. Isabella stood in the doorway, flanked by a grim-faced HR guy I'd barely recognized and a security guard who looked deeply uncomfortable. She didn't wait for me to finish my call. She just walked in, her face a perfect mask of corporate indifference. "Alex, we need the room," she said. It wasn't a request, it was a command. I quickly excused myself from the call, my heart starting to pound. "Of course, Isabella. Is everything okay?" "Everything is changing," she said, her voice completely flat. She gestured to the chair in front of my desk, but stayed standing herself, looming. "As of today, your position with Innovatech Solutions has been eliminated. We're restructuring for a more dynamic, forward-facing future. Your role is no longer fit." The corporate jargon was so thick it was almost suffocating, a speech designed to say everything and nothing. I just stared at her, trying to make sense of the words. "Eliminated? Isabella, I'm in the middle of closing the Northwind renewal. We're right at the finish line." A flicker of annoyance crossed her face, like I'd brought up a petty inconvenience. "Yes, HR will handle the finalization of all active accounts. Thank you for your work on that." She nodded to the HR rep, a man named Peterson. Peterson slid a thin folder across my desk. "This is the standard separation agreement. 2 weeks of severance, pending your signature. You have 24 hours to review it." 2 weeks, after 12 years. The insult was so staggering it felt unreal. The security guard shifted his weight, his eyes darting around my office at the photos of my family, the industry awards, the framed picture of the original team, a much younger Arthur and a much younger me, both smiling. I don't understand," I stammered, the shock finally cracking my composure. "My performance reviews have always been exemplary. I've dedicated my life to this company." Isabella let out a short, sharp sigh, the kind you save for a particularly slow child. "This isn't about performance, Alex. It's about direction. We need a team that's lean, aggressive, and digitally native. We appreciate your historical contributions, but the future requires a different skill set." Historical contributions. She made me sound like a fossil she'd just dug up. At 36, I was suddenly ancient. This was all a show, a public execution to send a message to every other long-term employee. The old ways are dead. Your loyalty means nothing. "You have 1 hour to gather your personal belongings," she said, her voice sharp and final. "Frank will escort you out." She turned and walked away without another word, leaving me with Peterson and the silent guard. The humiliation was a physical heat flushing across my face and neck. I was being fired and evicted like a criminal. The hour was a blur of disbelief and rising anger. Colleagues hurried past my glass-walled office, heads down pretending not to see. A few sent panic texts. "What is happening? Is this a joke?" I packed my life into a cardboard box. The photos, the awards, the stupid little coffee mug that said, "World's best problem solver." As Frank, the security guard, walked me through the office, I could feel dozens of eyes on my back. It was a walk of shame, and Isabella had orchestrated it perfectly. Sleep was impossible that night. The shock had worn off, replaced by a cold, hard fury. Betrayal was a bitter pill. I thought of Arthur, and a wave of sadness hit me. He would never have let this happen. This wasn't his legacy. It was a mockery of it. Around 2 a.m., tired of staring at the ceiling, I went to my home office and started unpacking my box of shame. And that's when I saw it. Tucked inside an old employee handbook was a thick, legal-sized envelope. It was my original employment contract from 12 years ago. I hadn't looked at it since. Fueled by anger and a desperate need for something to hold on to, I opened it. The language was dense, but then on page 7, under Key Personnel Provisions, I found it. A clause I'd completely forgotten about, one Arthur himself had added years ago when a competitor tried to poach me. It stated in crystal clear terms that as a designated Key employee, my contract could not be terminated without cause. And cause was very specifically defined: gross negligence, a criminal conviction, or willful misconduct. A vague restructuring didn't come close. Then came the kicker, the remedy. If I were terminated without cause, I was immediately entitled to a lump sum payment equal to 1 full year's salary, plus benefits and my average bonus from the last 3 years. It was an ironclad, golden parachute designed by Arthur to make his most vital people untouchable. I read the clause 3 times. My hand started to shake, not with anger anymore, but with a giddy, electric thrill. Isabella, in her arrogant crusade, hadn't bothered to do her homework. She saw my salary as an expense and swung the axe, never once reading the fine print. She had just triggered her father's secret alarm system. The next morning, I didn't call Isabella. I didn't send a desperate email. I made an appointment with the best employment lawyer in the city. I sat in her polished office as she read my contract, her expression shifting from professional interest to a broad, predatory grin. "Oh my," she said, tapping the page. "This isn't just a contract, Ms. Evans. This is a fortress. Her father must have really valued you." Then she pointed something else out. "And your age. While you're only 36 and federal discrimination laws usually kick in at 40, her comments about you being historical and needing a digitally native team? We can use that to show a pattern of age-related bias. It makes a wrongful termination claim much stronger because it paints a picture of her intent." My lawyer, Clara, laid out a simple strategy. We would send a formal demand letter, not to HR, but directly to Isabella and the board of directors, outlining the flagrant breach of contract and demanding immediate payment. We weren't asking. We were telling them. And if they refuse? I asked. Clara leaned back. "They won't," she said with total certainty. "Their legal team will see this and advise them to pay. A public lawsuit for wrongful termination, breach of contract, and potential age discrimination would be a PR nightmare for a new CEO. This document," she patted the contract, "is checkmate." Her confidence was contagious. I walked out of her office feeling taller. The humiliation was gone, replaced by a cold, clear purpose. Predictably, the first response was from Innovateca's HR. Peterson sent a curt email with the same 2-week offer, noting it was final and non-negotiable. They were doubling down, not even bothering to pull my file. Clara's response was a masterclass. She sent a second letter by courier, this time with my signed contract attached and the key clauses highlighted. It was addressed to Isabella, her father Arthur, and the entire board. It detailed their breach, calculated the exact amount owed, a figure deep into 6 figures, and gave them 5 business days to wire the funds before we filed a lawsuit that would be made very, very public. The silence that followed was deafening, but I didn't just sit around waiting. Through the grapevine of my old colleagues, I started hearing whispers of chaos. My absence had created a vacuum. That 8-figure Northwind contract stalled. The client, a notoriously prickly but loyal man I had spent years building a relationship with, was refusing to deal with the junior manager Isabella had assigned. He had specific, nuanced questions that only I could answer. He felt disrespected. He was threatening to walk. Then there was Project Chimera, a complex software overhaul for our second largest client. I was the sole project lead. My replacement, a 20-something hotshot with an impressive resume and zero institutional knowledge, was, as one source put it, drowning in plain sight. Deadlines were slipping. The client was furious. Isabella had assumed I was a replaceable cog. She was learning the hard way that I was the engine. On the fourth day, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. "Alex, it's Arthur." His voice was tired and strained. "I've just come from a board meeting. I saw the letter. Alex, I am so sorry." The sincerity was unmistakable. "It wasn't your fault, Arthur," I said, meaning it. "The hell it isn't," he sighed. "I put her there. I handed her my legacy, and she's turned it into a bonfire. She buried your firing in some restructuring report. When I saw that clause, I remembered it clear as day. I put it there to protect you, to protect the company." There was a long pause. She's been served a very harsh lesson in the difference between management and leadership. He told me the board was in an uproar. The potential lawsuit, plus the news of the Northwind and Chimera projects falling apart, had shattered their confidence in Isabella. They'd told their lawyers to pay me immediately. The next morning, I checked my bank account. The number was breathtaking. It was more money than I had ever seen. It was vindication, but the satisfaction was more than just financial. Isabella's first act as CEO was firing me. Her second was approving the single largest severance payment in company history, a stain on her very first quarterly report. The furious board put her on a probationary plan, with 2 senior members overseeing all her major decisions. She hadn't been fired, but she had been declawed. Her power grab had ended with her in a gilded cage. But my story wasn't over. The 1-year, paid non-compete clause was a gift. It gave me time and capital. I didn't rest. I started planning. I registered a consulting firm to provide the strategic, experience-based management that companies like Innovatech were foolishly throwing away. My first clients weren't hard to find. Northwind officially pulled their contract with Innovatech the week I got paid. Their CEO called me personally. "I don't know what you're doing next, Alex," he said, "but whatever it is, we're in." We signed an agreement 2 weeks later. The company behind Project Chimera followed. Within 6 months, I had a thriving business, and I needed to hire. My first calls were to the other dinosaurs Isabella had purged, talented, experienced professionals she had cast aside. We were a team of seasoned experts, and we were formidable. We were lean, we were aggressive, and thanks to decades of actual experience, we were more digitally native in practice than any 25-year-old with a resume full of buzzwords. The final, perfect twist came about a year after my firing. A headhunter called. Innovatech was looking to hire an external consulting firm to rescue failing projects and stabilize client relations. They were hemorrhaging clients, their reputation in tatters. He wondered if my new, highly regarded firm would be interested in submitting a proposal. I listened politely, a slow smile spreading across my face. I thought about the walk of shame, the coldness in Isabella's eyes, the sheer arrogance of it all. I thought about the fear, the anger, and then the sweet, clean taste of victory. "Thank you for the offer," I said, my voice calm and steady. "But our values just don't align. We're moving in a new direction." In the end, she didn't erase me. She unleashed me. She thought experience was a weakness, but it turned out to be my greatest weapon. She learned the hard way that you can't just inherit a crown. You have to earn the right to wear it. My story just goes to show you that it pays to know your worth, understand your rights, and never, ever let anyone dismiss you. The best revenge isn't loud and explosive. It's quiet, strategic, and built on your own competence. So, I have to ask, what's the most blatant display of new management incompetence you've ever witnessed? Let me know down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story and want more like it, Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.